Welcome back in, everybody, to a Thursday edition of Birds 365, ringing in the new year here. Happy New Year to everybody. Joined now by Mike Gill from 97.3 ESPN down the shore. Mike, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Happy New Year's, boys. What's going on?
Happy New Year, Mike. All right, we're not going to bury the lead with you. We need to hear Mike Gill's thoughts on Nick Sirianni shutting down history. How important it would have been to have the NFL's all-time rushing record. Where's Mike Gill on this manufactured controversy, I would call it?
Yeah, I don't care at all. I really don't need to see Saquon Barkley play in that game. In fact, they gave you the answer to the test immediately when he hit 2,000. They got him out of that game immediately. They could have left him in that game to get another 30, 40, maybe 50 yards, and this day would have been – see, that was why they got him out. They didn't want this to be a 30-yard thing. You know, it was get him out so it's 100, and 100 is like, yeah, it's not – you know, you're not automatically getting 100 yards rushing. But if they would have left him in to keep getting closer to the record and he ends up 30 to 20, yards short, now you really have the pressure to play him. You already have some pressure. I don't think there is pressure internally or anything. Look, do you want him to win the record? Of course you do if you're a fan. It's pretty cool to say our guy is the all-time leading rusher for a single season. But you have to take your best swing at winning the Super Bowl. There's no guarantee that he gets the record. There's no guarantee that he gets hurt. There's no guarantee that you win the Super Bowl. So you have to weigh all of that and take your best swing at the most important of those things, the record or a Super Bowl. And they deemed that the Super Bowl, crazy them, was more important than him winning that record. So you have to take your best swing. And your best swing is having everybody at full health and ready to go. Now, if they would have had a bye week in week 10, would they reconsider this and say, hey, we just had a break 5 weeks, 6, 7, 8 weeks ago. Maybe we'll give him a half. I doubt it, but they haven't had a bye since the 5th week of the season. This team has been going. And by the way, they've been pretty healthy all the way through. Some of these guys probably say, listen, I just need to take a day off, and this is the week, unfortunately.
It is, Mike. I'm going to play devil's advocate, though. You have a running back here in Philly that has a chance to have more yards in this season than Barry Sanders and Jim Brown and Adrian Peterson and Emmett and all the great running backs that have ever come through the NFL. You have a player in Philly that's on the brink of doing it. I feel for him why he would want to get that. I also understand both sides, but you think this has any chance to maybe mess with the chemistry in the locker room or the morale of the team? I don't think so, but I'm just thinking about, when you have a player that has a chance to do something like this and you kind of squash it. I'm not saying it was the wrong move, but any chance that it affects the morale?
I can't imagine. I mean, a guy like Lane Johnson, he didn't sound too interested in playing, and I don't know that's going to start a revolt that Lane Johnson was on this side. Jordan Mailata might have been like, yeah, it'd be pretty cool. I think the line, that's what you have to consider, too. Is if you play Saquon, then you have to play all 5 starting offensive linemen with him pretty much. And can you imagine if Lane Johnson ends up somebody rolling into his ankle on a meaningless game and then he can't play? We know what their record is when he doesn't play. Same thing if Landon Dickerson, who's been in and out of the lineup this year. So has Mekhi Becton's been in and out of the lineup. Could you imagine they lose Juergens in this game? They haven't had anybody else snap the ball essentially all season long. So you have to also take into account that all 5 of those guys would likely have to play for Barkley to get to the record. You're not going to throw him out there with the second offensive line to try to go get this record. So, no, I think they probably, A.J. Brown, I think he was pretty clear that. And by the way, we forget because the season was such a disaster at the end of last year. A.J. got hurt playing in a game that had no meaning to it, really, and then wasn't available for the Buccaneer game. So I think a lot of people think, well, they were going to lose the Buccaneer game with or without A.J. I think you would have felt better if he played. Do you want to play Green Bay or Washington with Saquon Barkley compromised? Probably not. So, no, I don't think anybody in there's any, I think look, when they took him out at 2,000, I think they were all on the same page that he was going for 2,000. There's your history. Look, there's a lot of people I'll be 48 next month. I'm assuming there's a lot of people younger than me who don't know who the hell Eric Dickerson is.
I said that, Mike. It's ridiculous.
Or like how many? We're acting like all of a sudden. This is funny. I find this to be interesting because it really hasn't been approached in the 40 years. It's been anytime someone gets to 2,000, it's usually late in the year and they don't have a chance to get there. This is the only time that someone's really had a chance to do it. People don't know how many yards Eric Dickerson had or even who he was. Now, if you're a little older in our age range, yes, you know who he is. But I don't even know how many people know the yardage total. This isn't a guy hitting 61 home runs or something. We're acting like this is some crazy number that is gone after all the time and everybody fails for it. Quite frankly, I was like, man, Eric Dickerson, by the way, is my favorite back of all time. I love Dickerson. 2105. Okay, great. I don't know how many people even knew that. Then all of a sudden people were acting like this is like the Maris home run record that he's approaching here.
Mike, I said the same thing. Great minds think alike. If you ask people Eric Dickerson before the season, the vast majority of Eagles fans are like, who's that? It's not that, there's these great viral videos. I don't know if you've seen them. They go up to fans dressed crazily, like rabid. I saw one with Joe Burrow, rabid Cincinnati fans. I saw one with Jalen Hurts, rabid Eagles fans dressed to the nines. I'm a hardcore fan. And they asked him a simple question. In the case of Cincinnati, it was, where did Joe Burrow go to college? And the vast majority have no freaking idea. Yeah. No idea. So
he started at one school and then he transferred to another.
Well, yeah, you got two chances. Same thing with Jalen Hurts. They did the same thing. Vast majority of these people dressed up don't even know where Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I just feel like in 5 years from now, if Saquon Barkley is the single season rushing record, I don't know. It kind of go,
But I use the same example, except I use 714, 755. You could use 61. Everybody knows these numbers. They were historic records. Nobody knew 2105 until we started writing about it.
Yes, exactly. Like if I was to say right now, who's the single season receiving record? I don't know that half the people watching have any idea what the number is, who it is. So I think it's just because it's just happening right now. You want your guy to get it. Now, I said at the beginning of the year, look, when they signed Saquon to the money that they did, I said, look, you had a guy last year who had over 1,000. You had Miles Sanders who had over 1,200. You had to really make a splash with, I said the number for total yards probably had to be around 1,800 yards to kind of justify the ROI that you signed him for. You've got the ROI and some. You've made history that he's gone over 2,000 yards. I mean, there should be no complaining other than, hey, let's take our best swing at trying to win a Super Bowl. Even if Barkley plays in the game, he hasn't had a week off since week 5. And he goes into that game, and maybe he's just a little sore, maybe a little slowed down. I was listening to an interview the other day with Wilbert Montgomery. He was on our station down the shore, and he was saying that after a 14-game, he was talking about the Dallas game where he runs, obviously, and makes history and goes to the Super Bowl. He said, by the time I got to that game, I wasn't even the same running back. I was so beat up and just beat down. And this was in conversation of going for the record. This is like 2-3 weeks ago. So even after the 14 games, he's like, I wasn't even the same running back in the playoff game that I was earlier in the season just because of the beating that you take through the course of the year. So imagine Barkley playing in another game after not being off since week 5. Why not just let him be as fresh and ready to go as he can be, him and everybody. It's not just Barkley either. That's the part of it. We're acting like this is just a Barkley thing. That record belongs to the line, it belongs to Barkley, and they all have to play an extra game to achieve it.
Yeah, I saw one national person say, Saquon's earned the right to do this. And I'm like, to your point, Mike, no. He's earned the right along with Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why Nick Sirianni calls it the ultimate team game. Think about this season for Saquon Barkley. It's generally been a second half season. What if you're at 50 yards in meaningless week 18 at halftime? Then what do? You got to roll out Lane Johnson and company in the second half again?
Right. Yeah, it's
not even it's not even a
not to mention, and I don't like this has been going around as well. Like, he would be playing an extra game. How does that factor into the conversation? Now, I've seen a lot of, and I looked at this too. He has less carries than Dickerson does at this point of the season. So theoretically, he would have less carries and more yards than Dickerson potentially. But he would have done it in an extra game. The whole extra. Now, Dickerson did it in 2 extra games over OJ, and not a lot of people seem to care about that. So maybe the extra game wouldn't matter all that much. But that would also be part of the conversation now, as well, he had the record, but he had an extra game. And the Eagles are saying, we don't need any of that conversation. We're going to win a Super Bowl here. So kudos to Nick Sirianni and the organization for being the adults in the room and making this type of decision.
Yeah. And Saquon himself, by the way, which I thought this was ironic because Saquon is a big history buff and he knows these numbers and he knows these records. And he was talking about the record and he said, I think the 2 most impressive ones would be OJ's because of the amount of games he did it in, and Barry, and he's talking about 2,000-yard seasons, Barry Sanders, because of the amount of carries it took for him to do it, which was like 335, ridiculous. Even he knows, all right, Eric Dickerson's had the record, but people have had better seasons. OJ had a better season. Barry had a better season. Maybe AP had a better season. People have had better seasons. All you're talking about is a compilation number, which so many things have to come into context for it. Not saying it's not important, but when measured against the other goal, it's ridiculous that anybody's talking about it. And that's directly from the mouth of Saquon Barkley. OJ, Barry had better seasons. So who cares?
Yeah.
Saquon, by the way, could already have the record if he didn't sit the first time they played the Giants, or he didn't sit in the other games, because you'll notice, I've also brought this up, Mike, the people that get that far tend to be on either mediocre teams or slightly above average teams. They're not on really good teams, because really good teams like the Eagles do what the Eagles have done. They sit guys at the end of blowouts. They rest guys at the end of seasons. So, in a lot of ways, Saquon has already had a better season than Eric Dickerson.
Yeah, and look, even last week when he got to 2003, they pulled him immediately. They could have left him out there and kept on running him for, another, who knows what he would have got. He might have approached another 30, 40, 50 yards last week had they left him in the game against a Dallas team that if it wasn't for just 5 plays, guys, that game was pretty close, according to Michael Parsons. But you have a game that's completely out of hand. If you really wanted him to get this single season record, you had a chance last week to continue to let him pad his yardage, and they made the decision right there and then that was it.
Yeah. Mike, where you at on Jalen Hurts, man? He's missed now 2. He missed 2 games. He's going to miss, obviously, the final game. Not going to play him in this game. He's going to have 3 games off. I think it's going to be like 23 days before he'll have off before he returns for the playoffs. Any concern with that, or where's your head at on Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to have seen him play probably last week in that game and get the chance and then sit out this week. I don't think he'll play this week. But, yeah, I definitely think, especially with the timing, the way that this offense runs on timing with him in the run game, and that's why the run game is so successful. It's been part of the big reason for Saquon's season is the role that Jalen has in that as well. We saw him get some timing down in the past game, and then we never really got to see it again as he went out early in the Washington game. So, yeah, and this happened to him a couple of years ago where he did play in that Giant game in Week 18, and then, in the playoffs he went on to play. But, yeah, I definitely think that's unfortunate, and that's another reason. I mean, he ran the ball, went down, got hit in the head, and we haven't seen him in a couple weeks. That could happen to anybody in this game if they play on Sunday. Jalen Hurts, an innocent carry. Is Saquon Barkley an innocent carry up the right sideline, and on his way, bang, somebody's helmet hits him, and he's out for a concussion protocol, and you know we don't see him in the playoffs. So there's definitely some thoughts about Jalen not being available. Even if that's another thing. If he wasn't available or cleared, okay, it's one thing. Now is he cleared yet?
No, he's not.
No,
cleared.
he's not cleared.
Yeah, so that's I think even the more thoughtful thing is, man, most of these guys get through the protocol. They're right there. He couldn't play last week, and now what's that?
I wouldn't worry about that. I wouldn't worry. It's easy
right. I'm not. I'm just saying if he did not get cleared for this game, not that they were going to play him in this game, but that would be 2 weeks that he could not get through the protocol, which I know we kind of just now think is like a fait accompli, that you get a concussion, you get through the protocol, you're ready to go like a week later. But if he didn't, you would be saying, man, a guy sitting out for not getting cleared for now 2 straight weeks is a little bit odd.
Yeah, I agree. And the last time you mentioned, Mike, the last time he did that was 2022 when he returned for Week 18. He didn't really have his best games in Week 18 or the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. If you remember, they destroyed the Giants, and Jalen didn't really have to do much in that game. And then Brock Purdy got knocked out of the conference championship game, and Jalen didn't have to do much. Now we obviously saw him have an exceptional Super Bowl, but I do wonder if he'll come out a little slow, in the start of the playoffs.
Yeah, that's the thing, is if he misses now. I mean, he missed most of the Washington game. I mean, virtually after the first series, he got knocked out.
Yep.
And then the next 2 games, so you're going 3 straight weeks of not having any action out there. So, yeah, you would imagine. And it's a shame because it was right when he was, is that what you all wanted to see? And then he got hurt. So, it's an unfortunate situation. But, Green Bay, a likely opponent.
They start slow, too.
Right. Well, and they've had, I think, Jair Alexander. I think he's out for the year now, right?
Yeah.
They put him on the.
He might go back. He might be able to get back to the Super Bowl if they make it that far. But he certainly.
So you wouldn't see him in that first game. And this is a team that on opening night you ran the ball pretty successfully again. You also had some big shots down the field against them that opening night as well. So it would be unfortunate for Jalen, but. This is why they are doing what they're doing. They have plenty of other options that they don't need Jalen to be the guy who was in the Super Bowl. And by the way, I see a lot of people concerned about playing Washington or Green Bay. And I'm thinking, man, I don't know, they're both solid wild card level teams. But if you're worried about playing either one of them, do you really think this team can win a Super Bowl?
Yeah. It's the playoffs. You're going to play difficult teams. How are you getting through Detroit or Minnesota if you're worried about Washington and Green Bay?
I definitely think the Minnesota thing has now entered people's minds more than it did maybe 3 weeks ago, that people are now taking them a lot more
serious. Sam Darnold, baby. Sam Darnold.
Yeah, Sam Darnold, interesting. You think about a guy who was a 2nd or 3rd overall pick in the draft. Wasn't it it was the Barkley draft.
Yeah. He deserved to be the 3rd overall pick.
But a lot of people wanted the Giants to take the quarterback and said, why are you taking a running back that high in the draft? And, of course, Darnold, there was the other argument was always, well, there was no real quarterback that even to take in that draft, and none of those quarterbacks really ended up making it. Now, here's Darnold. He's been with the Jets, Carolina, San Francisco, and he's finally kind of blossoming here in Minnesota. But, I think that has Darnold won people over enough to believe in the Vikings?
No, he's not. But people, how people are, Mike. They want to be right. You're the one. I just mentioned that before you came on. They want to be right, and they put the period on Sam Darnold's career. He's a bust because it was interesting. I heard Kevin O'Connell say this earlier, and I love the quote, so I've been using it. And he said, organizations fail young quarterbacks more than young quarterbacks fail organizations, which I agree with wholeheartedly. And, the assumption is because he failed, we now know what the New York Jets organization is. Never really got a chance anywhere else, had the 4-0 start the 1 year with Carolina. Again, a terrible organization. And all of a sudden he shows up in Minnesota after a year, by the way, learning with Kyle Shanahan, which helped. And by the way, Kyle Shanahan, I guarantee you, is kicking himself for not standing up and saying, this guy's better than freaking Brock Purdy. I'm sorry. He's kicking himself. And now he's got Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, Aaron Jones. And all of a sudden he can play magically. Supporting cast, good coach, quarterback builder. Josh McCown's there as well. Bang. Always had that top tier talent. If people don't believe in him, they should believe in him.
Well, and I'll tell you what, now in hindsight, you look back, if Minnesota wins the game on Sunday night, they become the one. The Lions are now the wild card 5 seed.
5.
And going the path of going back through the playoffs on that side of the bracket becomes very interesting.
Yeah.
That it could be another match, and then if you were the 1 seed, you get stuck playing Detroit again in the playoffs, as opposed to Philly being the 2 seed and getting the winner of that West South game.
Yeah.
I wondered, Mike, if the Eagles were in a better spot. I mean, if you're the Vikings and the Lions, you're going in, you got a big game in week 18. Everything's on the line for the 1 seed. If you're the loser of that game, Mike, you're coming out like –
the way I kind of looked at it
versus the Eagles, Mike, they're sitting high. They're like, okay, week 18, we're resting everybody. We already know we're playing the Commanders or the Packers. We're ready to go for the playoffs.
Right, and that's why the key was beating Dallas so that you can – this is your bye week right here. This is your bye. Get yourself ready and go win your 4 games. Whereas the other teams, they're still playing. One of them is going to get the bye, the other's not. But the team that gets the bye is going to have to face that team most likely again. So that makes it a lot more difficult to face the same team that close together, a division possible. So that one, the team that wins the number 1 route, their route actually gets a little cloudier than it sounds when you're like, hey, you get the 1 seed, you get that bye, you get that home game, you get that week off.
I want the bye, man. I want the.
Well, the Eagles are getting the bye this week.
Yeah, but it's not a real bye. I'm talking about. I guarantee you, the number 1 seed, Kansas City, and I think Detroit's going to beat Minnesota. So, for sake of argument, Kansas City and Detroit, I guarantee one thing: they're not losing on Wild Card weekend. No way.
I agree. I agree with that too. That they're not losing on Wild Card weekend. Now, don't you think the Lions would like to have the bye?
They're getting a bye.
Oh, you think they're going to win, right? Yeah. So they're getting. But my point is, if
like
Minnesota beat
Mike,
what's that?
Who do you like, Lions or Vikings in that game?
I tend to like the Lions a little bit better, although I do think that their defense is starting to show that the war of attrition is starting to catch up to them. They still have a lot of their offensive pieces. They did lose Montgomery, but they still have Gibbs and the receivers they have. Their offensive line, much like the Eagles, is the star of the show over there. People don't realize sometimes how good their offensive line is. So their offense is still able, but can they go shootout every single week?
Yes. The answer to that is yes.
Yeah. Well, so I like them against the Vikings in this game on Sunday, and then you get the week off, and you have to play the Vikings again. That makes that a lot more a trickier game, I think. Not
necessarily, because Tampa's a difficult place to play.
Well, and that's another thing. Playing Tampa's not a walk in the park either. So the team with the 2 seed, I think, has a much better path. Sans the bye.
They definitely have a much better path, and it might be unfair than the 14-team winner that's going to be the 5th seed. Yeah, they're screwed. That's a bad spot. But that number 1, the team that wins, I'd rather be that team. And that's why they're going to fight. And both of those teams are going to fight to be that number 1.
Oh, yeah. I don't think either one of them does not want to. Look, they'd much rather be the 1 than the 5. I'm saying if you look at it, being the 2 seems to be a better spot because you don't need week 18 to play. So you kind of do get your bye here. you have to play the extra game in the playoffs, but the path as the 2 is better than the path as the 1.
Well, that's like Penn State and the BCS.
Well, that thing was a mess.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know who from Penn State is running that thing, but they gave them the easiest straw in the history of mankind. But yeah, this is the NFL. I don't want to play the Green Bay Packers. If I can avoid it and I can sit at home and watch somebody else.
This Packers team has already proven that they can go on the road and win a playoff game. That's what is appealing. They did it last year against a Dallas team that, we all laugh at Dallas, but had won, 12, 13 games last year. And Green Bay went on the road, and I don't think many people...
at home, averaging 40 points a game at home last year, Dallas.
And
Green Bay destroyed them at AT&T Stadium.
Yep. And you look at, so Green Bay, a team last year was 9-8? I think they were entering the playoffs, so they have no worry about going on the road and trying to win a game. Now, the opposite side is Philly and Green Bay have played. Philly beat them on a neutral site. They feel like, hey, in week 1 we were better than you. We should be better than you as the season matriculated, and we know our team better. But, yeah, it would be a challenging matchup, no question. I think their defense is just kind of average, just like we thought on opening night. That's part of their problem. Their defense is just kind of average. They don't really have the guy in the passing game. They have a bunch of guys. They kind of spread it around. But hey, Washington just beat you a couple weeks ago, right? They had the formula to beat you. Now that game was a little wonky as well. But hey, I think you definitely have the better path than if you were the 1 seed right now. I like the fact I said, look, beat Dallas, get your bye, and then go win 4 games. That's what it comes down to. Get your bye this week, which you got. There's no playing Saquon Barkley. Go back to the beginning of the conversation. There's no need to play Barkley. A.J. Brown, I don't need to see him or Smith. They can all have a nice day off. The offensive line, have a nice night. Let's see if Tanner McKee can sling it a little bit with Johan Dotson. What's Goddard's
big
story?
Dotson game. They started his practice window yesterday. So he'll be back for the playoffs. I don't expect him to play this week.
So get all those guys the week off and take your 4 best swings at it. That's what it comes down to at this stage of the season. And you have the path to get there. You're going to get
I just don't. I'm not going to tie myself in a pretzel, Mike, and convince myself the number 2 seed is better than the number 1. I mean, the Eagles won in 2017. They were the number 1 seed. They made the Super Bowl in 2022. They were the number 1 seed. I mean, it is much easier.
And listen, I totally agree. It makes me feel better that they didn't need to have to play this game. If you would have lost last week and Washington
I agree
wins,
with that. I agree with that.
Right. So them not having to use this game to get a seed, if they would have lost last week and Washington wins, then they had to win this week to get the 2 seed still.
Well, yeah, here's where I agree with you. If there were, and this is what happened last year, there was a slight chance that the Eagles could win the NFC East. Dallas had to lose to a terrible Washington team, and they had to beat the Giants, and they would have won the NFC East. So they played their guys. And what had happened, you talked about AJ, people forget, Reed Blankenship got hurt, didn't play in the playoff game. They missed about 90 tackles in the playoff game. Sidney Brown got hurt. That's when he tore his ACL. So he would have been the backup. They had to go down to Avonte Maddox, move him from corner to play safety. People forget all this and say, oh, well, they were collapsing. And they had a very small window to get a higher seed and be the NFC East champions. And they went for it. And if that would have happened this year, for instance, Minnesota would have had to lose to Green Bay last week. Detroit would have had to lose to San Francisco, essentially, because then he would have had to have Minnesota beat Detroit, and then the Eagles would have been the number 1 seed. Very, very small window, very unlikely to happen, even if everything went right last week. And you'd be playing your players, and who knows, maybe 3 more guys get hurt. Maybe
now,
it's not Saquon.
The question would be if they had beaten Washington, and they were still in the mix, I guess they would have been out still, or this wonky strength of victory thing, would that have been coming into play? Because this would have been interesting too. The NFL likes to play games where you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
They took the Minnesota game, obviously, in this standalone game. But if Philly was still in play for the
it
one
would have
seed,
been a 1. It would have been a 1 o'clock. Yeah.
yeah. So if Philly was still in play for the 1 seed based on strength of victory, because that's what it would have came down to if Minnesota, if Philly had not lost to Washington and they were all still with the same record,
yeah,
that would have made it a really interesting decision to see if they would have played Barkley or not, or just said, we don't care, we'll take the 2 seed.
Yeah, I think they probably would have went for it there. Remember, I think the Detroit bye week was 5-2, wasn't it? Weren't they early?
I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I think the Detroit. I know the Detroit bye week. I don't know if it was exactly 5, but I'm pretty sure it was early in the year too. So that's interesting, man. They're going on a long run, but the NFC playoffs, guys. I'll tell you what, man. That playoff
it was week 5. It was week 5.
Week 5, yeah, I thought it was the same as the Eagles. That NFC playoff picture though is a damn good playoff picture.
Well, you think about 4 weeks ago how things changed so much in the NFL. 4 weeks ago it was the Lions and the Eagles, and then everybody else virtually everywhere. Well, now all of a sudden, Tampa looks like a team that, hey, Tampa, we know they have a ton of talent. Baker Mayfield has always kind of been, he's the Sam Darnold of that team. Do I believe in Baker? Do I not believe in Baker? It's just Baker Mayfield. If he plays well, that team is pretty good. Green Bay is a team I think everybody, even entering the season, had a little bit of fear of. Jordan Love signs the biggest contract ever. They got all these receivers. They won in the playoffs last year. They went toe-to-toe with San Francisco. So people believed in Green Bay, and this goes back to people wanting to be right. You believed in them back in August, so you believe in them now. You want to be right about Green Bay. So that team, and then Minnesota, I think in the last 4 weeks, I think for 13 weeks of the season, you're like, I don't believe in Minnesota. This team won 13 games a couple years ago. They lost to the Giants in the first round. But I think people are starting to take a little bit more notice of them as a legit possibility that they could be a team that makes it to the Super Bowl.
All right, at Mike Gill Show. Make sure you follow Mike on the X platform, YouTube, his YouTube channel as well. Listen to him on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN South Jersey. If you're local, does a tremendous job there. Commanders or Packers? Who would you rather play?
Probably Washington. First time in the playoffs for them. Having to go on the road to try to win that first playoff game. I know Jaden's been awesome. He was awesome in that last couple. But I feel like if that game was a little wonky with Hurts getting hurt in the game and just to score 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, I think that's kind of far-fetched to see that happen again in a playoff game on the road. That Washington team, I think, just has less talent overall. With the quarterbacks being comparable, Love's a different style of quarterback, but I'm just talking about level of player. So I'll probably take my chances against Washington.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that, mostly because of Jordan Love has playoff experience, Jane Daniels doesn't, and I like Vic Fangio in that spot better. But
yeah, and I think Washington, both defenses are just average, but Washington they did a really good job against Barkley in the second half of that game, but remember Hurts got hurt in that game, and that kind of changed the dynamics of the whole run game there. The first time he played Washington, he blitzed them. And by the way, Washington, he is third all-time in the history of the league in yards against an opponent. He has more yards per game against the Washington franchise than any other franchise he's ever played. So, yeah, I think I'll take my chances with Washington if I can, but obviously right now the chances are you're going to play Green Bay, I think. I've been off. This is my first day back on the air, so I'm a little
it is. You're right. It looks like it's going to be the Packers. It's not definite, but it does look like it's going to be the Packers. All right, Mike, last question then. Anybody you're looking to watch this weekend versus the Giants? Any backup, any bench guy that has given you some excitement for the game this weekend?
The only guy I think that you might have an eye on is Bryce Huff. Are they going to play him and just try to let him play a game. Just say, go out there and play, man. Go out there, get your snaps, play 40, 50 snaps. Just go rush the passer and see if he could just start teeing off on somebody. Because obviously they signed him to big money. I was not a fan of the signing. It has not worked out. He got hurt. Unfortunate. He came back, made no significance in the game last week. So, yeah, he would be one guy if he gets – if now, are they going to play him in the game? I would imagine he would be a guy that would play. On defense, which guys are not going to play? I would imagine Jalen Carter, you don't see him. Probably not Josh Sweat. But, yeah, to say which one guy that I would pick would be Huff to say, all right, let me see him be the star of the defense for 1 week.
Hey, we got the Pro Bowl rosters. If you're interested before you leave, Mike.
Did they give them out?
Yeah, I just got them. Trying to look for the
what is it? The Eagles and Lions against the AFC.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley is a Pro Bowler. Shockingly, joking. Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens. Congratulations to Cam Jurgens. Jalen Carter gets the Pro Bowl nod. Zach Baun, well deserved. Glad Zach made it because he deserved it. I don't think I missed anyone.
So no Jalen Hurts, no A.J. Brown, and no Devontae Smith.
No, the Pro Bowl quarterbacks are Jared Goff, Jaden Daniels, and Sam Darnold.
Did you say Quinyon Mitchell?
Did I miss Quinyon? No, he did not make it. J.C. Horn, Jalen Johnson, they made the right decision. Best cornerback in the NFL. Nobody knows about it because he plays on
How
Chicago.
does Mailata not make the freaking Pro Bowl?
That's
he
a good
missed
question.
4 weeks, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah, he missed 4
Okay,
weeks.
that's probably why.
I will say the Jurgens thing is interesting because now he's got a Pro Bowl. He's 1 for 1 as the center, and you start to get that. Now the Pro Bowl, they don't even play the game anymore. What do they do? A flag football game?
Yeah, flag football.
Yeah,
The Pro Bowl games, they do a bunch of skill things and
right.
Yeah.
But Jurgens is now 1 for 1. Are we going to be looking 12 years from now at a guy who is a perennial Pro Bowler, a possible multiple-time All-Pro? Like, pretty unbelievable. Like, the Eagles' center spot with Kelsey to Jurgens could be, like, the Packers' quarterback position. Like, you've had a run of guys for, 25 years of having, they went from, Favre to Rodgers and now to Love. That's a pretty interesting accomplishment there.
Jeff Stoutland, another feather in his cap.
And you saw that video of Stoutland, how pumped he was when Barkley got the run to get to 2,000 yards.
I mean, Mekhi Becton had a hell of a year. You can make an argument. The tackles were Lane Johnson, Penei Sewell, Tristan Wirfs. The guards were Dickerson, Tyler Smith of Dallas, Chris Lindstrom. Centers were Frank Ragnow, Detroit, Cam Jurgens. So very Detroit and Philadelphia-centric, as you would expect.
I guess the next question will be, is Zach Baun in play for the Defensive Player of the Year?
He should be. They give it – by the way, bad news on the Rookie of the Year front. Jared Verse made the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, he's going to
Quinyon Mitchell did not. Not that, it has anything to do, but that kind of gives you a little bit of a highlight. And then the quarterbacks in the AFC, that's what it – Josh Allen, the starter, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. And hopefully nobody's at the Pro Bowl games because everybody wants to make the Super Bowl, and then you skip the Pro Bowl. So hopefully you don't see any Eagles down at the Pro Bowl. But those are the guys that made it, and there'll be a bunch of alternates. That'll probably come out. Well, I'll get those.
By the time they get to the alternates, if the Eagles don't make the Super Bowl, like Tanner McKee gets announced to the team.
Yeah.
Wasn't it who got Huntley? Didn't he make it last year after starting 3 games?
Yeah, I don't think it was last year, but a couple years ago. Yeah.
Tyler Huntley, the Ravens quarterback.
Yeah.
When he was on the Ravens. I guess he's in Miami now.
But anyway, Pro Bowl. Exciting news.
Yeah.
And a bunch of Eagles. So good for those guys. I'm most happy for Zach Baun because I'm glad people recognized it. They only take 2 inside linebackers, off-ball linebackers. Fred Warner, obviously, number 1. But Zach Baun, that's a big step because it usually takes you, to get that reputation. But But, corner, you're talking about Quinyon. Again, the starters are Jalen Johnson, who's the guy, and Byron Murphy from Minnesota, who's had a good year. But I think Quinyon's better. But he's got 6 interceptions, I think.
Yeah,
So
Quinyon with 0 didn't help his cause, but that's almost better, meaning nobody throws your way. I think he got beaten, once or twice the whole season for a touchdown.
Yeah, and J.C. Horn's very good player. Devin Witherspoon are the backups, so he's going to have to wait a little bit.
Good stuff, Mike. Thanks for joining the show today, brother. Good to have you back on the air. You're missed on the airwaves when you're not on. We appreciate you joining in today. Make sure you guys follow Mike at Mike Gill Show and listen to his show 2 to 6 Monday through Friday at 97.3 ESPN. Mike, thanks for joining the show, brother. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, everybody. See you.
Thanks, Mike.
Good stuff from Mike Gill joining us here on Birds 365. Appreciate him joining, as always. Good takes on everything that's going on, John. Interesting Pro Bowl rosters, We talked about the passing game all year, and a lot of people get upset when you talk about the passing game. I don't know why, but people get upset, and none of our passing game made the Pro Bowl, Johnny Mac. No AJ, no Jalen, no Smitty. I mean, that was AJ Brown out of the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, the starters are and should be Justin Jefferson, Amon Ross, St. Brown, which makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense.
The backups are Terry McLaurin, who's had a great year, and CeeDee Lamb, who's, Cowboys didn't have a great year, but he had a great year. So tough to argue. I would say AJ's better than everybody on that list, but Justin Jefferson. But
yeah,
you got to get the numbers as well.
I guess he missed a couple of games too. So I guess that goes into it as well. All right, we're gonna take a commercial break. When we get back, if you guys can believe it, we are going to deep dive and preview into Eagles versus Giants, Week 18. Who is Johnny Mac watching this weekend? Who are you guys watching this weekend? We'll have a lot of backups, and we'll run through who the potential starters could be in that game. So we'll do all that next here on Birds 365. We'll also have a little bit more playoff talk as well. Any super chats I get or we get, I will read off to John. So thanks everybody for being here this morning. Let's get to our break. Before I do that, I do want to tell you guys about the great people at BetUS. Go check them out, and you can see the promo code on your screen. It's YouTube 150. That gives you 150% sign-up bonus on your very first deposit, and you get 125% on your second and third deposit, all up to $2,000. So deposit less and bet with more at BetUS. Go to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa. We'll be back in 3 minutes, everybody, on Birds 365.